If you have ever been asked what your age is or what you do for a living that makes you afford a certain kind of lifestyle, then you have been profiled or stereotyped. Now, profiling has so many meanings, but in this context, we're looking at it from the aspect of drawing up conclusions about a person based on assumptions. Maybe looking at the fact that they have certain things that they shouldn't be able to afford normally or otherwise. And I'm sure you already know where this conversation is headed. We'll be looking at it from two different angles. One, the major one, which is profiling of youths across Africa and even black youths across the world. That's when we talk about racial profiling by security operatives. Then we'll ease into the aspect of profiling on social media, because as we know, social media has a powerful leverage, in this day and time. This is Fafanua Afrika with me, Blessings Mosugu. It's a youth conversation show across the African continent, a show that addresses topical issues as they relate to the youth involvement and participation, and basically everything that pertains to the youth. Of course, it promises to be an insightful episode, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. In October 2020, youths across Nigeria converged on many streets to protest police brutality, especially on the youths in the country, which sometimes starts off with profiling. And this is one of many instances where youths around the world have been stereotyped, either by race, by age, or whatever factor that is considered. And it's a more risky and dangerous game when it comes to security operatives, because these people can profile someone and it degenerates quickly into something very, very unfavorable, and it could completely go south. And basically, stereotyping for the police is when an officer thinks a person is committing some sort of crime or is a criminal simply because, they have a certain race, a certain culture, a certain age, or they possess certain things that the uniformed men think that they shouldn't. This habit of categorizing people based on whatever reason has especially been detrimental to the youth across Africa, and a typical example is how you see it degenerate into brutality. Now, the stereotypes of a particular group, such as the young people that are held by a society, have an impact on how all members of that group are viewed and treated by the society, and on their status in that society. Now, stereotyping involves the imputation of unchanging and inflexible characteristics to all members of a particular group. Well, today, joining me to discuss this very, very important issue are my guests. I have with me Timi Olagunju, the founder, Youth and Motion Nigeria. I also have Funke Adeoye, the founder, lead counsel of Hope Behind Bars Africa, Nigeria. And also I have, last but not the least, Ephraim Isong, the principal state counsel, Ministry of Justice, also in Nigeria. Thank you so much, lady and gentlemen, for joining me on the show today.
Thank you.
My pleasure. All right, let's start off the conversation. Timi, when we say profiling and stereotyping, what do we understand by that?
I think you've given a proper context to it. I would want to bring it more into the context of, for example, right, for one, I've been close to 12, 13 years as a lawyer, but interestingly, on a particular day, I decided to wear jeans and a t-shirt with the bangles and,
I think we're struggling to hear you over here. I think we have issues with your network. Hopefully that is fixed. We'll come back to you, Timi, on that question.
No problem.
Okay. Also, I would also like to hear from Funke. What is your view on profiling and stereotyping, especially in this part of the world?
When I think of the word profiling, I see profiling in this part of the world, especially in Africa and in Nigeria, as a discriminatory practice by law enforcement or by anyone actually that targets individuals, majorly young individuals, because of specific reasons. So a person might be profiled because of their race, a person might be profiled because of their age, a person might actually be profiled because of their religion. For instance, I don't know, but I know at times, when they're watching movies and then you see somebody on an aircraft, who looks like, someone from the, from the north, there's that feeling of, oh, this person might be a terrorist and all of that. So profiling for me is a discriminatory practice or a discriminatory bias towards certain people. Just okay, this program today is targeted at young persons, but profiling occurs, based on age, based on race, ethnicity, religion, or other issues, basically.
All right, thank you so much for that, Funke. Now, I would also like to bring in Ephraim. Do you agree with this, and what do you think about profiling generally? Because, over time, we've heard of cases where people are arrested and, charged for criminal offenses because of profiling. And worse still, some people are still behind bars awaiting trial because they were profiled wrongly. So what do you think about that?
Yes, hello. I think it's a very discriminatory practice, like the lady has rightly said. It's a general assumption, but it's not based on nothing. It's based on an observed characteristics. It's based on observed behavioral pattern of maybe the youths, as we say, or the people that look a certain way or behave a certain way. And you see the youths in Africa and Nigeria, we've gone modern now. So you see people that prefer certain types of hairstyle, and the security officers just assume and generalize that because this person looks this way, this person must be a criminal. And most times that's not the case. Most times I deal with I'm a prosecutor at Ministry of Justice, and what we see most times is that even the people that commit the most serious crimes are neatly shaved and have a nice haircut. And so we need to, stop generalizing and assuming the character of people based on how they look.
In Ephraim, you are in the justice sector, in the executive and judiciary sector, and I would like for us to understand this, right? We know that this hasn't always been a problem here in Africa, and it kind of started off with the growing popularity of the fraudsters, the Yahoo boys, like they call them, and it usually happens at traffic stops where police officers who are supposed to be enforcing the law, ensuring that things are done smoothly, will just stop someone, like you said, because they look a certain kind of way, or they're holding, let's say, a phone that they originally think that they shouldn't be able to afford, or gadgets, and they just start to profile you, and it goes south from there. I would like to know, is there nothing in the Constitution that speaks against this? Are they allowed to just stop anybody? And because that's not in their area of jurisdiction, it's not something they should be doing on a normal day. So isn't there anything in the Constitution that speaks against that?
Oh, that's a very nice question. The thing is that the Constitution in Chapter 4 has given several human rights to the Nigerian citizens, speaking from Nigeria, and I'm sure, I don't know how it's done in other African nations. And these rights are freedom from discrimination, which is one of the issues we are talking about. These rights are freedom of association, freedom of expression, freedom of movement, freedom to belong. When you look at from discrimination, you look at them talking about community. And now we have we have the tech community, we have the Gen Z community, and these people behave a certain way. And the Constitution has stipulated, don't discriminate people by the way they look. But to the question, do the police have the right, the law enforcement have the right to stop people from moving freely? And the answer, unfortunately, is yes in some cases, and that is because it's for our own security. But the Police Act in Section 38, Sub 1, states that you can't stop a person unless you have reasonable suspicion. Reasonable suspicion now creates the problem of interpretation. So most police people would just say because a person looks a certain way, they reasonably suspect that this person is a criminal or is going to commit a crime. But like you rightly said, we have the tech CEOs who also look the same way. We have music producers and musicians. But the law in the Police Act also goes further to tell them that in Section 54, that your reasonable suspicion should not be based on the appearance of the person, or the hairstyle of the person, or the clothes a person prefers to wear. Your suspicion should be based on investigation, or a confirmed information, or something other than just the appearance of the person. So they do have the right to stop a person and search without a warrant if they suspect that this person might be committing an offense, or the person has committed an offense. But the law balances it out to tell them what reasonable suspicion should be. But we are in a country where where people have a wide interpretation. There could be an abuse of power, and that's the issue we'll be addressing today as we go on.
That comprehensive breakdown of what the Constitution actually says about that. And still talking about the Constitution, I would like to bring in Timi. Now, we've seen a lot of times where people get arrested because they were profiled. And, for months and years, they're behind bars, awaiting trial. We can't exactly say that these people are guilty of the crimes, but because they were profiled, and once it gets off the streets, once they take them from the roads where they were, apprehended at first, to the prison or the cells, it becomes harder to bring them back out. Isn't there anything you think can be done about that?
Well, I think to a large extent, one of the key solutions to that is one of the things we did during the NSAS protest, right? During the NSAS protest, I was quite key at helping people get out of prison almost immediately when they're arrested, right? And so the challenge usually is the fact that most people do not have access to legal services at the appropriate time. And as such, get their cases escalated in such a way that they become part of something bigger, a bigger scheme of crime that they have no business with, and as such end up in prison. So it basically goes to legal access, access to legal representation quickly. And one of the key things is the fact that civil society is trying its best, but then the government needs to do more. For instance, in Lagos, I know that they have the Office of Public Defender, but that caters mostly to civil matters, employment contracts, issues of molestations and all that, but may not speak to criminal matters. I think it's time that we start to have investments in providing legal representation offices across the local governments in the country, as it were, and that to a large extent can help deal with issues right on at the police station, where the police has the power to grant the bail before it then escalates into court, and then the police take advantage of the situation. During the NSAS protest, some of the people that we got out almost within 24 hours of their arrest after being alerted, some of those persons mentioned to us that there were people in prison. There was a particular guy that was arrested. He wasn't part of the protest. He was just walking by, but he couldn't speak English to interact. And then he was arrested. I was told that, he was crushed. The police officer crushed him on the head with his foot, with the boot, whilst he was laid down at prison. And so because of that kind of situation, around 2 a.m., in the midnight, we had to act on the situation and identify the police station based on the information we received. And in 24 hours, got him out. The police were surprised because this is someone who could barely speak English. This is someone who could only interact. Even pidgin was a difficult thing for him. And by so they wanted to victimize him and use him as scapegoat, which is, for some cases, that is the case. They just get profiled for crimes they have no business in, to fill a certain quota of the fact that, okay, there are certain arrests that have been made or something of such nature. And so we had to get him out and get him treatment, and he was one of those that were brought before the NSAS panel. That says get him treatment. Even people contributed towards giving him a trade because he was basically brought in, I think, from the village to help some persons as house helps. So you see, where a society is built on inequality and inequitable distribution of wealth and resources and education, enlightenment, literacy, you have such situations coming up on board. And that's why it's very important that we increase capacity for legal and civic education, early on. You can't be speaking with, for example, a child born in the US. They're kind of quite aware from the onset what the fundamental rights are, although they are still profiling there based on race. But our profiling is basically based on those who have and those who do not have and have nots, and that is not the foundation for an equitable egalitarian society. So I think proactive measures towards education, proactive measures towards platforms for legal representations across local governments in the country, and also the investment of people in knowledge, legal knowledge, is a key part of it. I think, practically speaking, that the Nigerian Bar Association can partner with the Nigerian Unions of Teachers. Teachers understand pedagogy. The Nigerian MBA understands law, and then come up with a robust legal curriculum for primary, secondary school kids. I think that, to a large extent, can both solve the challenge, both short-term and long-term. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much for that, Timi. We're still talking about profiling and stereotyping, and Timi has done justice to that, and so have my other guests, Funke and Ephraim. Now, having said that, let's go to the streets of Africa. Lots of youths have something to say about profiling, especially when it comes to law enforcement agents. So let's look at what they have to say, and we'll be right back.
I'll have times when my friends, some of the people that I know, have been harassed by the police based on whether they were driving an expensive car or carrying an expensive gadgets. Sometimes when I see situations like this, I wonder what happened to innocent until proven guilty. What proof do you have that they are criminals? Is it because of their earrings, the way they are dressed, maybe because they have dreads or tattoos, and you're quick to jump to a conclusion? Most times youth dress the way they do because they have they just want to stand out, be different, be an individual, or sometimes they are following trends. It's best for the police to do their due diligence rather than harass Nigerian youths. It's something that's painful to see when someone that's working hard decides to go out for a night of fun and they end up being branded and labeled a criminal, a fraudster, and a thief.
I think the harassment of Nigerian youths by the police based on their dress codes, based on the tattoo they wear, based on the kind of hair, the carrying a dreadlock or the carrying gadgets. I think this wrong profiling is based on the knowledge gap in the police force, the level of ignorance in the police force. You act based on the knowledge you have, you act based on what you know. If they're not aware of what their job role is, if they're not even aware of the constitution which they act based on, then there's a problem already. We see them harass people, ask them questions, interfering into their privacy, want to see their phones. I mean, all of this is due to the fact that some of them don't even know their job, they don't even know why they wear the uniform that they wear. And this comes from the lack of training and enlightenment, proper enlightenment, and the failure of structures. And I think we'll get it better with time.
Once a young lady, an unmarried woman, is still in the car, she's well dressed, she has an apartment, there is this notion that she's either a rose girl or she's someone that doesn't look up and all of that. And you still, the way they harass her, by mistake, let that young lady be outside during 8 p.m., like those late hours of the night. She's coming up from one method or something. There's just this wrong perception, and then you are harassed or you are asked to drop money because you're coming late or you're driving or these are things that need to stop. These are things that are cake, and these are things that should not continue in the year 2023.
Obviously, I think I can say for the majority of Nigerian youths who've actually been victims of police brutality in one way or the other. Personally, I have not, but I've had like instances that were really, really close to me. I've had friends that like these things that have actually been done to. Okay, one instance I will recall was the time I was in Warri, the other state. So there was this police officer. He saw us just because we were driving and stuff. But I was with a couple of other friends. We were just together. So he packed us out, and he was like, he initially like wanted money. But because we were standing our ground, decided like becoming agitated and stuff. And he actually turned into a very rowdy place because then he actually hit one of my friends, and obviously like we fled up and like it turned into a blown out issue than it should have. But I think like in the first instance we actually stopped not because we didn't have our particular, not because we didn't have like we weren't dressed properly or something, but because he saw us and he was like, how can this young boy or how can this person claim to have a rightful ownership of this car at this young age, basically. Like, but you know, to riding out and like living life per se. Like, I think there's a stereotype as to who should have what in this country.
I mean, one will think that this profiling, be it ageism, or, I mean, we don't have a lot of racial profiling in Africa, but, you know, categorizing people based on what you see, one would think that it's a trivial issue, but most times we have cases of even mistaken identities that result in a lot of innocent people getting killed or spending time behind bars. Now, Funke, I'm sure that you have seen such cases. I don't know what the statistics is. Can you tell us about that?
All right, thank you. Yeah, so in the line of my work, so I've been practicing for about 10 years now. And one of the reasons why I decided to focus largely on criminal defense and, you know, providing free legal services to people that are incarcerated is actually because of what we're discussing today. Now, before I started my work, I had seen instances where young people were actually extrajudicially killed because of issues of profiling. Now, statistics, according to the Nigerian Correctional Service, is that 7 out of every 10 persons behind bar is awaiting trial. Now, we don't particularly have the statistics to know how many persons are there because they are profiled. But based on our activities providing, you know, services to people across the country, we can say for certain that these issues are actually very, very rife. I just circling back to what the other speaker said, Timi, he had mentioned the issue of legal awareness and the issue of that inequality, which is actually one of the reasons why profiling thrives. But I would actually want to circle on the issue of the quality of law enforcement officers that we have, the quality of training that they receive, the fact that, you know, the Police Act actually says this is what should be done, right? The Police Act says people should not be profiled based on what they look and all of that. But the question is, across the country, how many of the police officers on the field know that this is the case? In the line of our work, we've seen instances where people, just like you have said, are in prison for issues of mistaken identity. They are in there for 5, 6, 7 years. And because they don't know their rights, because they are not able to assess quality legal practitioners, they are there for a very long time, right? We had the case of a young man who was actually profiled because of his hair, Emmanuel. And then he was arrested. And I think he spent about 6 months in SARS custody. This was sometime in 2015. And without the blink of an eye, he was charged for a capital offense. So, for instance, when we met him, he was facing trial for a capital offense. Now, when you're facing trial for a capital offense, most likely you would not get bail if you don't have a very good lawyer. Now, when we met with him and we had conversations with him, we found out that at the time when he was arrested, some other persons were also arrested. But, you know, because they were able to get access to legal practitioners, they were able to get out of prison. And then this guy had spent 5 years in prison. So just back to your question, the statistics are not quite clear. We don't really have as much data for the number of people who are in prison because they are profiled, but because we do know that the number of people who are in prison, who are awaiting trial in prison, is about 70%, according to the Nigerian Correctional Service Act. We do know that one of the major reasons why this is so is because of this issue of racial youth profiling.
All right, thank you so much for that, Funke. And I would also like for us to talk about why this even came up in the first place. I mean, Timi, do you think that because of the level of corruption or fraud that we have in this part of the continent, these people are justified to think or profile people the way they seem fit? What I mean is that I mean, we've heard of cases of corruption, of fraudsters. There was one recently of someone who duped a whole organization, and the person was from this part of Africa. So do you think that because of these cases that keep arising of young people defrauding a lot of other people, these law enforcement officers just make claims because of the statistics of crimes that we have in this part of the world?
Well, I think it is more of the fact that it's a foundational issue. And like I like to say, if the foundation be destroyed, what can the makeup artist do, right? So each agency of government has its role when it comes to issues of fraud and cyber crimes of those nature. You have the EFCC, institutional frauds and the like. You have the ICPC, right? Those are agencies saddled with responsibility and perhaps, let me put it in context, expertise to deal with issues of such nature, right? But you see that there's a certain lopsidedness. And so it is not primarily because of the proliferation of those kind of activities that necessitates the way the police treats the young person or profiles the young person based on dress or markings on the body or positioning in terms of environment they're found and things like that. It is a fundamental challenge with the police itself. And I must tell you that let's take it back to the foundation, to history, because those who fail to consider history are doomed to repeat same, right? When you go back to the Nigerian police itself, the Nigerian police was mostly colonially, something called the West African Frontier Force, right, which was to cater for colonialists and colonial governments at that time and support their security efforts. And then subsequently, after independence and when Nigeria became a republic, properly republic in 1963, right, subsequently, a certain consultant was brought in, to develop the current Nigerian police as we have it. And that consultant was a British consultant. And guess what? The foundation of the Nigerian police that we see now was built on what was obtainable in Egypt, the Egyptian police force. And as you know, right, a goat cannot give back to a lion. You can't expect, considering the issues that we've seen, you cannot say that when you look at top ranking of police, forces or police apparatuses in the world, that you can find the Egyptian police force as a top 10 example or epitome to use. But then, for whatever reason, the Nigerian police was tailored and structured after the Egyptian police force model. And so what you see increasingly, aside that, is that years of military regime militarized the police in such a way that the police saw themselves as working for the regime rather than the people who paid their salary. That's the taxpayers, right? And so what you see in that situation, and you who pays the piper should dictate the tune. But because of that skewed relationship, such that the police is more tailored towards protecting the regime. That's why when you are driving on the road, you see someone that is coming in a convoy, and the police is using their sticks to damage the car of motorists in order for a certain VIP, who is a VIP based on taxpayers' money, to pass, right? And so those kind of situations, you see examples of the fact that the police is structured in a way that it is to serve the regime rather than the people who are taxpayers. And that same trend has continued from that time into the Fourth Republic, for example, in Nigeria in 1999. And so you will need a complete overhaul of such a structure where the police understands from recruitment to training that they are a key part of serving the people and protecting the people. Aside that is the fact that the welfare Like, in Latin maxim, we say in law, salus populi et suprema lex. The welfare of the people is the supreme law of the land. The people in this sense is the police. Have you ever gone to their training schools and check out the toilets in the training schools? Have you ever gone to their barracks where the police live? You'll be appalled by the situation that they live in, right? And these are the people that are going out to fight criminals. So when they see any form of luxury in a young person who is like the age of their younger brother or their child, they start to feel that sense of resentment towards that person because they feel that their welfare is not properly being catered for. And so those are fundamental issues that we must deal at a policy level. And when I say as a policy level, by the political leadership and will to drive these things. Look, culture, not politics, determines the success of a nation. But politics can change a culture and deliver it from itself. Hence, why we need to also bring in the fact that as we are voting on 25th of this month, that we vote right with our PVCs so that we can rejig the structures across the country, including the structures that cater to the foundation and the welfare and education of the Nigerian police. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Timi. That was really insightful. And a lot of things that people need to learn were the things that you mentioned. And I would like to bring in Ephraim. Now, Timi talked about the fact that some of these people need to be retrained if that's what the case is. And then, it makes me wonder, so does it mean that these set of people are given so much power and they know so little about the Constitution? Ephraim, I mean, a lot of people are saying that the police they're wielding too much power. I mean, standing on the road, asking people. And the worst part is, so let's say they arrest someone and put them, in prison. No one cares to vet or to investigate what the actual problem is. Those victims or alleged criminals just stay behind bars and wait for trial without any other person trying to find out what happened. So do you think that they're giving too much power?
Thank you. Yes, I don't know if to agree that they're giving too much power because most of the reason why their laws leave room for wide interpretation is because I'll give you for an example. Let's say someone just finished committing an offense, actually committed the offense, and is trying to flee and fix the profile, and the police is trying to do their job on the road, and the person says you don't have a warrant. What it will take for the police to go get a warrant, and the time it will also take just to stop and stop the crime from happening, or arrest the people that committed the crime if they actually did. It's what we have to keep it on a balance. We have to keep it on a balance. That's why most of the laws give a bit of a wide room. That's why you see the law saying upon reasonable suspicion, you don't need a warrant to arrest a person or to search a person. But then, leaving that wide room is now what the issue is, leaving for the police to give their own interpretation. And as far as the laws continue to be subjective, there will be room for the police and law enforcement to keep abusing the law. But like one of the speakers rightly said, like Timi rightly said, there's an educational gap. The process of their recruitment is very important. The certificate level most of them require is first school leaving certificate. And we know that is not enough to say someone is properly educated. So we have to look at the recruitment, how they are recruited and how they are trained. Their training process is also very important because the Constitution, there are laws talking about supervisory laws. The ACJL or the ACJA, as the case may be, that's the Administration of Criminal Justice, has left room for a magistrate. Like in Akwa State, where I'm a magistrate at the end of every month is supposed to go on prison inspections to make sure that everyone that was arrested is properly arraigned before a court. And we have what we call the legal aid, who gives free legal representation to those people that cannot afford it. So these laws are there to mitigate these things, but we need to look at solutions that can help to curb the reoccurrence because of the wide interpretation that most police have the power to give. So we need to look at abroad, like in America, they use body cams. If we can, start using body cams to when police are interacting with civilians, it might help them to reduce the level of, illegality that they use to execute the law, because they know that whatever they are doing is being recorded and is being recorded as evidence. And also a superior officer that is well trained and well educated is also important to help to checkmate these excesses of the police force. The laws are there in place, but how do we ensure that we don't stop police from doing their duty, and also ensure that they also do not overreach the boundaries and breach the fundamental human rights of the Nigerian citizen? So I think that is the dilemma and the quagmire that we are left with. And as the laws proceed, I think we'll find the right solution to that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Ephraim. I mean, hopefully there is a balance, just like you said, to that, because that alone will, I think, solve a lot of the problems that they face. If these people have the power to arrest or detain people, then there should be a proper body that checks to be sure that these people are actually committing the crimes that they were accused of committing. I want to say a big thank you to my guests for staying with me, and they will still be here. But right now, it's time for us to go on a short break. And when we come back, we'll be we'll be talking about this from another dimension, and that is looking at the social media profiling. Don't go anywhere, we'll be right back. Thank you so much for staying with us on Fafanua Afrika. We have been talking about profiling and stereotyping, especially in this part of the world, speaking of the African continent. Now we look at some very unfair youth stereotypes and what certain behaviors could actually mean. Now we will be narrowing it down to social media shortly. We realize that the media frequently portrays young people excluded from wage work and inactive, the aimless people. They portray them as aimless and alienated from mainstream society. And not just the unemployed people now, they portray people who are doing well for themselves as, fraudsters or, going into illegal means of getting money. Now, this image feeds on fears of crime, of violence, and of course on social unrest. In the same vein, social media has a way of categorizing every youth of similar looks or qualities who seem to be doing well as fraudsters, like we have said earlier. Now, this is a very misleading characterization, and that's why we are talking about that on Fafanua Afrika today. Now, before we went on our break, I was having a conversation with my guests. I still have my guests with me. I have Timi Olagunju, the founder, Youth and Motion Nigeria. I have Funke Adeoye, the founder and lead counsel, Hope Behind Bars Africa in Nigeria. And of course, I have Ephraim Isong, principal state counsel, the Ministry of Justice in Nigeria. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for still being here with me.
Thank you.
All right, my pleasure. If you can hear me, I'm hoping that you all can hear me. Funke, when we were talking about, before we went on a break, I was asking if this police officers that, stop people on the road and arrest them for any reason have been given too much power, because of the fact that we see sometimes they arrest people and for several months or years, these people are waiting for trial, not even having anybody come to find out what exactly happened. And I would also like for us to look at it from the angle of people who, police brutality generally. Sometimes you see the policemen hitting, like Timi said, that one of the policemen during the NSAS period actually hit someone while on the floor. So we've seen cases like that countless times where policemen will either hit people, whether with the guns or with canes or with different things, just brutality in general. And a lot of times that these things trend on social media, the feedback that people get is that their badges will be taken away from them and they will the proper punishments will be meted on them. But if you look at it in the long run, nothing is done to these people. And so we now see a repeat of situation, because it looks like, we do it and we get away with it. So that is what I would want for us to talk about now. Do you think that the punishments that are meted on these police officers who brutalize people, especially those who are innocent, is enough? Do you think that they are being punished enough for their offenses?
All right, thank you. Thank you for that question. So yeah, I totally agree, or I would like to look at it from this angle that we don't actually have the requisite consequence mechanism in place for the police officers who commit these extrajudicial offenses. And when you look at what happened during NSAS, I think one of the major asks of the young people was for the police officers who had been who had committed these offenses for them to be punished. But you find that over time we often have more stories or more media reports of brutality than we have of what actually happens to these police officers. Now, the Police Service Commission is supposed to be in charge of investigation and ensuring that police officers are working in line with their duties. But in actual fact, we've not actually had a whole lot of that. Now, I'm going to circle back to the case of the young lady that was killed during the Christmas break, Bolani Rahim. Very, very sad and unfortunate story. But when you look at what happened between after the unfortunate incident and now, I was just having a conversation in my head that if this happens for every other case, then maybe we'll have less issues of police brutality. Now, if you recall correctly, before the incident that happened, we have happened in that same place where the incident occurred, I think in Adeoye, Lagos State to be precise, a young man had been killed. We don't know if it's the same police officer, but a young man had been killed around the Adeoye axis by police officers, and it was reported in the news. And I think NSAS trended again, and that was all. But when the unfortunate incident happened with Bolanle Rahim, because she was a lawyer, we saw the NBA picking up. We saw the police officer was dismissed immediately, and then he was because he was dismissed immediately, he could be tried, and the NBA stepped up and all of that. So if we have that sort of, I believe if we have that sort of rapid response to issues of police brutality, we would have less incidents of it. Because yes, a whole lot has been said about training. Training is important. A whole lot has been said. Maybe also their welfare and every other thing. But if the officers don't see that officers like them are being made scapegoats, they will continue wielding the power that has been given to them more than they should. So I really do think that we don't particularly have a very good consequence mechanism in place. The laws are there as to what should be done. After the NSAS panel, I know money had been given to a whole lot of money, for instance, in Lagos State, a whole lot of money had been given to the victims of police brutality, but we did not particularly hear anything about what happened to the officers who committed the offense of overusing their power and whatnot. So yeah, I totally agree that even though yes, we have the right laws and everything in place for ensuring that the officers are being penalized, it's not actually being implemented the way it should be.
All right, thank you for that, Funke. Now, still speaking of consequences, I will come to you, Timi. Another challenge that we face on this side of the world is the fact that there is a lack of transparency, and by that I mean, so let's even say that these people are, the appropriate punishments are meted on them. The people do not know that that's happening. It's like there's a way they just, do their thing behind the scenes. They come out and promise that, okay, this person will be punished, his badge will be taken away from him, he'll be suspended or, sent out, whatever the case is. And that's all we hear about the situation. There's no follow-up. We don't see that, okay, his badge was actually taken. In fact, there was a case where a man who killed someone, one of the police officers who killed someone, it was traced back that he had done something similar some time ago, some years ago, and it was promised the public that his badge would be taken away and he'll be sent out of the force. But he was still there, and eventually he ended up killing somebody. So there is a lack of transparency in the system. What can we say about that?
I perfectly agree with your point that there's a lack of transparency. And, like we like to say, it is not enough that justice is done. Justice must be evidently seen, felt, seen to be done. And that is the key tenet of justice itself. And so any justice that is served and is not seen to be done is not justice. And the challenge really is the fact that, and the truth is this, what you promote is what becomes popular, right? So there's been a promotion of a culture of impunity, and that culture of impunity has allowed impunity in the police to become popular. And the challenge still is the fact that, like I said earlier, it's a foundational challenge. It's a mindset challenge. The police officers see themselves more like a group of, some kind of cult, sort of, and their aim or their training of their mindset is to project or protect the regime rather than the people. And so the fundamental ideology of the police itself, which is not really people-driven, citizen-centric, is still the same ideology that drives justice within the police, such that you have cases of so-called prosecution of police officers that are done in secret, like a court of some sort, or like a court-martial kind of thing. When someone perpetuates an act of evil, whether as a police uniform person or as a civilian, publicly, it behoves that the case is also communicated publicly. And so that is a core challenge. The ideology that drives the entire fabric that makes the police itself is built on protecting the regime, protecting that cult rather than serving the people, until there's a flip, a structural flip based on restructuring of the police, based on retraining of the police, based on re-welfaring of the police. There will be a challenge. And by welfaring, for example, look, there's a tendency for you to look at the mirror often and start seeing yourself like what you see in the mirror. Police officers are often exposed to criminals, right? And so their psyche or default mindset is perhaps to see people from that perspective over a certain period of time. And the danger with that in a system like ours is the fact that because there is no psychosocial welfare institutionalized for a police officer as a matter of compulsion, then you have situations where this kind of things fester over time.
Right.
For example, so those are key issues. For example, there should be, a partnership with the National Association of Psychologists towards ensuring that maybe on a quarterly basis, a police officer is gauged on their psychosocial situation as a basis for promotion or the basis for, whatever circumstances. So until we begin to tie all these knots together at a policy level, we will continue to agitate and nothing will happen.
All right, thank you so much, Timi, for that. And I want to use this opportunity to say a big thank you to my guests, Timi Olagunju, founder, Youth in Motion Nigeria, Funke Adeoye, the founder, lead counsel, Hope Behind Bars, and of course, Ephraim Isong, principal state counsel, Minister of Justice, Nigeria. Thank you so much for joining me on my show today.